"This can't be happening," Sarah whispered, her coffee going cold as they hunched over Mark's laptop at the kitchen table. The security footage revealed an operation of military precision, Deborah directing her husband and teenage son like foot soldiers, pointing out the prime seasoned pieces while they loaded their pickup. Mark watched in disbelief as they made 3 separate trips over 2 hours, systematically dismantling his winter preparation. "I count 43 logs taken," Mark said, his voice unnaturally calm. "That's about $350 worth of firewood, plus the labor." The camera had captured everything, Deborah checking her watch, pointing to specific sections, even smirking directly at the camera in a moment of arrogant triumph. She knew you had cameras, Sarah realized. She's not even trying to hide what she's doing, because she thinks she's untouchable. Mark closed the laptop with a decisive click. "I'm going over there." 20 minutes later, Mark stood on the Kensington's immaculate porch, the security footage queued up on his iPad. Gregory Kensington answered the door in Ralph Lauren golf attire, a practiced smile disappearing when he recognized Mark. "Deborah isn't available," he stated flatly, starting to close the door. Mark tilted the screen, showing the man his moonlight activities. "Interesting family outing last night. Most people don't steal firewood at 3 in the morning." Gregory's expression hardened. "I'll get Deborah." Minutes later, Deborah appeared in the doorway, her expression transforming from annoyance to practiced victimhood. Her manicured hand fluttered to her throat in a gesture that might have seemed genuine to someone who hadn't watched her methodically direct the theft hours earlier. "As I explained yesterday, the HOA has enforcement authority for covenant violations," she stated, arms crossed defensively. "The materials were removed as part of that authority." "You stole my property," Mark countered, his teacher's patience wearing dangerously thin. "This isn't enforcement, it's theft. Return my firewood today, or I'm filing a police report." Something flashed in Deborah's eyes, not fear, but excitement. Section 17.3 grants the association authority to remove violations at the homeowner's expense. She reached behind her, producing a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws with highlighted sections. "Feel free to contact the police, but understand that involving law enforcement will trigger the Community Disruption Clause. That's an additional $500 fine." Her smile returned, genuine this time. "Oh, and as for the wood, we're hosting a neighborhood bonfire this weekend. Consider your contribution a welcome gesture to the community." "Is that what you tell yourself when you steal from your neighbors?" Mark's voice remained steady, even as his hands clenched at his sides. "I am protecting this community," Deborah hissed, dropping the pretense. "People like you move in thinking the rules don't apply to them. Either adapt to our standards or find another neighborhood." She closed the door in his face. At home, Sarah called the local police while Mark prepared to file a report. The responding officer, Officer Ramirez, seemed sympathetic as he reviewed the footage, but his expression changed when Mark mentioned Deborah's name. "Kensington, as in Gregory Kensington's wife?" he asked cautiously. "Yes, he was helping her steal the wood," Mark confirmed. Officer Ramirez shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Kensington is the city attorney's golf partner and a major donor to the Police Benevolent Association. This is technically a civil matter between you and your HOA." He offered an apologetic shrug. "My suggestion? Take it up with your HOA board." Mark's emergency HOA board appeal the next evening yielded nothing but uncomfortable glances and mumbled suggestions to not rock the boat. The treasurer, a retired accountant named Harold, whispered after the meeting that Deborah's husband was a partner at the city's largest law firm, and the last homeowner who challenged her authority had faced mysterious building code inspections until they eventually sold their house at a loss. "It's not worth it, son," Harold muttered. "We all have to live here." Walking home, his faith in justice deeply shaken, Mark passed the community bulletin board advertising Deborah's upcoming bonfire. Using locally sourced wood, the flyer boasted with shameless audacity. His 5th-grade daughter would miss out on fireplace s'mores this winter because one entitled neighbor had decided their rules superseded basic decency. As he cut through the forest preserve shortcut, Mark's shoe caught on something, a rotting log dislodged by recent storms. He bent to move it and froze, noticing something interesting. The decomposing wood was crawling with industrious carpenter ants, their tireless mandibles excavating intricate tunnels throughout the log. Mark Wilson massaged his aching shoulders as he admired the impressive woodpile behind his garage. 6 weeks of dawn-to-dusk weekend work that had calloused his hands and strengthened his back. Each perfectly split log represented security for his family's first winter in Pine Hollow, especially with the meteorologists predicting record-breaking cold. The neat stack of seasoned oak and maple stood 5 feet high and 12 feet long, his personal triumph against the elements. From her second-story window next door, Deborah Kensington lowered her binoculars with a scowl. As HOA president for 8 consecutive years, she'd cultivated Pine Hollow into what Suburban Living magazine had called a pristine enclave of property value perfection. That acre of lumber threatened everything she'd built. The fact that this newcomer, a public school teacher, no less, had brushed off her previous friendly suggestions about proper lawn maintenance only intensified her determination. The confrontation ignited when Mark found Deborah in his driveway photographing his woodpile, her Mercedes SUV idling at the curb, her immaculate French manicure tapped impatiently against her leather portfolio as she lectured him about community standards and how selective enforcement leads to neighborhood decay. The interaction ended with Deborah threatening daily $100 fines unless the unauthorized material storage was removed within 48 hours. But half the neighborhood has firewood, Mark protested, pointing to similar stacks visible in nearby yards. Deborah's smile never reached her eyes. Those situations are being addressed. Perhaps you should focus on your own compliance issues. She slipped a yellow violation notice into his hand before strutting back to her vehicle. Mark stood in his driveway, yellow paper crumpled in his fist, watching Deborah's luxury SUV glide away. This wasn't what he and Sarah had envisioned when they'd stretched their budget to the breaking point for a family-friendly community with good schools for Emma and Liam. After 13 years in their starter home, this move was supposed to be their reward, not another battle to fight. Inside, 7-year-old Emma looked up from her homework. "Dad, why was that lady yelling at you?" Mark forced a smile. "She wasn't yelling, sweetie. She just has strong opinions about our firewood." "Is she going to make us get rid of it?" Emma's eyes widened. "But you promised we could have s'mores in the fireplace when it snows." "Don't worry," Mark assured her, ruffling her hair. "We'll have plenty of firewood for s'mores all winter." Later, Sarah examined the violation notice while stirring pasta for dinner. "This is ridiculous. Kevin and Diana across the street have twice as much wood stacked on their side yard. Apparently, they're being addressed," Mark said, mimicking Deborah's condescending tone. "I checked our closing documents. We paid $375 for an HOA compliance inspection that specifically noted no violations." Sarah sighed. "Maybe we should just move the wood to the shed. The shed barely fits the lawnmower, and properly stored firewood needs airflow." Mark's science teacher instincts kicked in. "Besides, this is clearly selective enforcement. I'm not going to let some power-hungry HOA president with too much time on her hands, but yes." That night, after the children were asleep, Mark scored the 76-page HOA covenant line by line. As he suspected, nothing specifically prohibited properly stored firewood. The closest applicable rule concerned unsightly storage of materials. But the covenant explicitly defined unsightly as items visible from the street or neighboring properties that are broken, rusted, rotted, or otherwise in disrepair. His meticulously stacked, neatly covered woodpile fit none of those criteria. Armed with screenshots of the relevant sections, Mark drafted a detailed email to the full HOA board. He included citations of the applicable bylaws, photographs of his own properly maintained woodpile, and documented evidence of 7 other properties with similar wood storage. He even attached a printout from the county fire marshal recommending proper firewood storage techniques, which he set up followed to the letter. Satisfied with his logical, evidence-based approach, Mark went to bed confident in a reasonable resolution. Sarah curled against him, murmuring, "You're good at fighting the right battles." The security alert on his phone woke him at 3:17 a.m. By the time he fumbled for his glasses and reached the window, all he caught was the tailgate of a pickup truck disappearing around the corner, and his woodpile reduced to less than half its original size. Mark's garage transformed into a covered entomological laboratory. The idea had come to him in an instant, but execution required patience and precision. Each evening after tucking Emma and Liam into bed, he retreated to his workspace. Guided by the detailed lesson plans he'd refined over 15 years of teaching 7th grade science. "What are you working on out there?" Sarah asked on the third night, leaning against the doorframe with a curious smile. Mark looked up from the log he was carefully hollowing. "Remember that unit on social insects I teach every spring?" Sarah's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Mark Wilson, you're not." "I'm creating educational materials," he replied innocently. "Very specialized educational materials. Using information from his classroom curriculum, university extension websites, and 2 entomologist friends who found his situation fascinatingly vindictive, Mark refined his approach. His colleague Dr. Lin from the university had laughed until she cried during their phone call. "Carpenter ants are perfect," she confirmed. "They're not like termites that eat wood. They excavate it, creating vast nesting galleries, and when disturbed, they don't flee. They seek the nearest suitable wooden structure to establish new colonies." "And they're active in winter?" Mark asked, scribbling notes. "Not typically, but if they kept warm enough and have a food source, they'll remain active year-round. That's why they're such pests in heated structures." She paused. "Hypothetically speaking, a colony disturbed by sudden heat, say, from a fire, would frantically seek new accommodations." Over 5 evenings, Mark collected 6 logs from the forest preserve with active carpenter ant colonies, each containing between 3,000 to 5,000 ants. Using tools borrowed from his school's shop class, he carefully hollowed additional chambers in each log, creating comfortable habitats that he baited with sugar water and protein mixtures. "Consider this your temporary housing," he told the industrious insects as they explored their expanded accommodations. "Your forever home awaits across the street." The most challenging part was making the infested logs appear identical to premium firewood. Mark split several ant-free logs alongside the colony logs, then carefully reconstituted the infested ones using wood glue and pressure clamps, disguising the seams with a mixture of sawdust and bark. He finished each log with a light sanding and natural oil treatment, creating what appeared to be perfect, premium firewood that any HOA president would be proud to display. "Dad, what's that smell?" Emma asked one evening, wrinkling her nose at the sweet aroma wafting from the garage. "Just a special wood treatment," Mark answered, "for a science demonstration." The timing had to be perfect. Through neighborhood gossip and his kids' social media updates, Mark confirmed the Kensingtons would attend their country club's monthly dinner the night before the bonfire. He set his alarm for 9 p.m., the sweet spot when most neighbors would be inside for the evening, but early enough not to arouse suspicion. That night, Mark dressed in a utility company vest he'd kept from a school career day, added a clipboard and headlamp, and slipped out through the back gate. The disguise was simple but effective in suburban settings. A person in a work vest with apparent purpose becomes practically invisible. Deborah's elaborate backyard entertainment area came into view as he rounded the hedgerow. Motion sensor lights illuminated a space that belonged in a luxury magazine. Stone fireplace, built-in sound system, and a custom wooden pergola covering an outdoor kitchen and seating area. And there, artfully arranged in a Pinterest-worthy stack beside the fireplace, stood his stolen firewood. With methodical precision, Mark removed 8 logs from strategic locations and replaced them with his special creations, positioning them throughout the pile to maximize their potential impact. For good measure, he lightly misted the surrounding wood and nearby wooden structures with the sugar protein solution that Dr. Lin had assured him would be irresistible to exploring ants but undetectable to human senses. As he slipped away, Mark took one last look at the custom wooden pergola and matching deck furniture that Deborah had recently showcased in the neighborhood newsletter, all constructed from untreated pine for aesthetic purity. The carpenter ants would find it delicious. "Enjoy your locally sourced firewood," he whispered into the night. "Daddy, why aren't we going to Mrs. Kensington's party?" Emma asked as Mark helped her with homework Saturday evening. "Tyler said there's going to be a chocolate fountain. We have our own special plans," Mark replied, sharing a knowing glance with Sarah. They decided to take the kids to a movie instead, providing both an alibi and protection from the imminent chaos. From the safety of the theater parking lot, Mark checked social media. Deborah's bonfire spectacle had begun as the perfectly orchestrated social event she'd planned: catered appetizers, signature cocktails, and the neighborhood's most influential residents gathered around her stone fireplace. Her Instagram story showed pristine table settings and artfully arranged hors d'oeuvres, with the caption "Perfect evening with perfect neighbors, #PineHollowLight." It was Sarah who spotted the first sign of trouble: a live video posted by their neighbor Jen, originally focused on the elegant food spread, but suddenly panning to show commotion near the fireplace. Mark increased the volume just in time to hear Deborah's husband announcing a toast to community standards while adding 2 large logs to the central fire. "Those look familiar," Sarah whispered, squeezing Mark's hand. Within minutes, the well-composed social media narrative dissolved into chaotic real-time updates. Jen's video captured the moment. The hollow chambers warmed enough for the carpenter ants to shift from dormant to frantically active. The logs began to visibly move on the fire as thousands of ants sought to escape, some falling into cocktails while others made expeditious journeys up pant legs and into carefully styled hair. "What is they? Someone shrieked off camera as the video zoomed in on a log seemingly pulsating with life. The footage captured Deborah's transformation from poised HOA queen to shrieking hostess, slapping at her cashmere sweater as tiny invaders explored its fibers. "Get them off," she screamed, her careful makeup streaking as she batted at invisible assailants. The video ended abruptly, but not before capturing several guests abandoning half-eaten hors d'oeuvres as they fled. "I think we've seen enough," Mark said calmly, putting away his phone as their movie's previews began. Sarah's shoulders shook with silent laughter. 3 days later, the true scale of Mark's revenge revealed itself during Tuesday morning school drop-off. Parents clustered in unusually animated conversation outside the elementary school. "Did you hear about the Kensingtons?" whispered Diana, a PTA mom, when she spotted Mark. "Their entire backyard is wrapped in extermination tents. Apparently, they've got the worst carpenter ant infestation the pest company has ever seen." Mark arranged his features into a mask of concerned surprise. "That's terrible. How did it happen?" "Nobody knows for sure," Diana continued eagerly, "but the exterminator told my husband that carpenter ants typically establish new colonies in spring. Their unusual winter activity suggested they'd been artificially cultivated. Greg had to cancel the regional partners meeting at their house because the ants have excavated most of their deck. They're estimating over $20,000 in damage." The emergency HOA meeting called that evening attracted record attendance. Mark sat quietly in the back as Deborah, attending via Zoom with visible dark circles under her eyes, tearfully described an invasion threatening property values throughout Pine Hollow. The exterminator, a no-nonsense woman with 20 years of experience, displayed slides showing extensive damage to the Kensington's wooden structures. "The concerning aspect is the timing and scale of this infestation," she explained. "These colonies are behaving unnaturally active for winter months." When several homeowners reported finding carpenter ants near their own firewood, Mark helpfully raised his hand. "I was just reading about this in a science journal," he offered innocently. Apparently, proper wood storage is crucial for preventing pest infestations. He distributed information sheets he'd printed from the University Extension Office. Perhaps the HOA could clarify bylaws to specifically permit properly stored firewood as a preventative measure. "I'd be happy to demonstrate appropriate stacking techniques." The suggestion received unanimous approval, even from Deborah, who attended the meeting via Zoom while professional remediation crews worked in her background. Her husband could be heard off camera arguing with the insurance adjuster about their claim denial due to a preventable pest infestation, not covered under standard policies. 2 weeks later, Deborah announced her resignation as HOA president, citing a new health sensitivity. The rumor, spread by her former allies, was that she'd developed a severe insect phobia after her pergola collapsed during a private anniversary dinner, sending thousands of carpenter ants raining onto the candlelit table. As winter deepened, Mark enjoyed warm evenings by his fireplace, his restored wood supply, now protected by a small shed unanimously approved by the new HOA board. On the season's first snowy night, he helped Emma and Liam roast marshmallows for s'mores, the promised winter treat finally delivered. "These are the best s'mores ever," Emma declared, chocolate smeared across her smile. Mark glanced out the window toward the Kensington's house, where workers continued their extensive renovations. "They certainly are, sweetheart," he agreed, raising his hot chocolate in a silent toast to the tiny architects of justice who taught Pine Hollow's most entitled resident that true community standards should include respect for others and a healthy respect for nature's smallest inhabitants.